Build Show. Steve Baczek, architect. Yeah, we're back out on site this week. We got a real treat for you today. We have rough roof framing going on here. As you can see, we have our trusses delivered. We have our framing contractor, Lifetime Contractors out here, and we have our crane. So today, we're going to be setting some roof trusses. We have some very specific air sealing details that are actually part of the rough roof framing and setting the trusses. So all these details have to get coordinated and planned for in advance, worked out with the general contractor, and then we're putting them into execution today, and you're joining us. So let's get after it.
Multi-generational home on a budget. A Build original series brought to you by Zip System Building Enclosures, Fantech, New Wool, Bosch Home Comfort,
All right, I knew I said I was going to climb up the ladder and we're going to go talk about those details. But when I'm walking by the stack of trusses, I figured, man, this is a really great opportunity to look at the trusses up close before they get put in place. We have a little quick discussion about truss members, the dimensions, et cetera, et cetera. So let me come around this side here. We'll grab this truss, we'll just slide it out a little, and I'll climb in here. They have the tagline already set up, so this one's going to be flying up there soon, but I just wanted to give you, like I said, quick rundown. So when you're looking at a truss, first of all, there's the nomenclature. Bottom chord. Bottom chord is basically, as it states, the bottom of the truss, right? It's the bottom member that basically sits on the house. The top chord is the one that makes the outline of the truss, right? So that's the top part of the truss. In between the truss, we have a whole series of web members. The web members are all the diagonal pieces that take the forces that bounce between the top and bottom chord to basically give it its structural integrity. When you're down at the edge of the truss, we have what's called the rafter tail, which makes up basically the bearing point, which is the wall, exterior wall is going to sit right underneath the truss here, and that's basically where all the forces accumulate, and then the force goes down into the wall, and the wall resists it, and that's how the building, or the reason the building stands up. The rafter tail is basically making the roof overhang. In this case here, we have a 24-inch horizontal dimension to the overhang. This will get trimmed back 1.5 inches. After they get them all in place, they'll snap a line and then they'll trim these so we have a nice perfect line down the trusses, and we'll apply what's called a rough fascia, which is basically the backbone of that face that you see at the bottom of the roof, right? And the reason that we just don't snap it on the end is these are manufactured pieces in the factory, and so the jig might slide a little. We might have one truss that's 26 1/8. We might have one that's 25 15/16, 25 7/8, 26 1/16. So as you're going down that roof line, that truss tail is moving in and out maybe 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. So the way we get that exactness is to overcompensate in that dimension, snap a line, and then once they're all in place, then we can cut that nice clean line there and get that fascia on there. As we move up the truss, because we're in climate zone 5, we have what we call an energy heel. The heel is the part of the truss that sits and bears on the wall below. So here I called for a 10-inch heel, which is basically giving us added insulation. Typically, this top chord would run down through here, and you would only have about 4 1/4 inches of basically truss height. But by calling out that heel height, now I get 10 inches. So in a vented roof, when I subtract that, say, 1.5 inches or 2 inches, I have a strong 8 inches of insulation up against the edge of the roof to combat things like ice damming, but also to get that more consistent level of insulation in my vented attic out near that outer edge. And the easiest way to basically do that is truss manufacturers put in what I've come to know as what's called the slider. And the slider is this 2x6 piece here. It basically just gets slid into this joint. That joint gets expanded till that heel height is achieved, in this case 10 inches. And then you can see the metal brackets here are inserted here to basically hold all of these together and basically result in that 10-inch heel height. So anyways, we got these set. You can see the cranes there sending up some supplies. They're about to send up these trusses, so we can hit that ladder and we'll go up there and we'll check it out now. So I'll see you up on the second floor. All right, so we made it up to the top of the second floor. I'm literally at the top of the wall frame. Everything that goes on here, as you can see, they're setting roof trusses behind me. But before we set the roof trusses, we want to make sure of one of my favorite concepts in building, continuity, right? So in all the houses that I build or design and that get built, have a continuous air barrier. Remember the red line test? I always harp on it and how it traces around the building. Well, in this particular house, on the outside of the wall over here, we have Zip R9. It's an insulating sheathing, but it's our primary air barrier. And that basically comes up to the top of the wall. The task at hand is, how do we connect that exterior air barrier out here to the exterior air barrier across the truss on the other side? We have to have something on what I would term the sixth side of the box, right? There's the four walls, the slab below us, but we need something to form that sixth side of the box. So the detail that I come up with is we put a membrane down, and you can see here, if I fold it back, this is our double top plate, and basically we have two 6-inch legs on each side of that membrane. This is a Sega MyVest product. You can see there, it's a weather resistive barrier. It's made by my good friends out at Sega. It's MyVest, M-A-J-V-E-S-T. But it's their weather resistive barrier. And the reason we're using this is it comes in an 18-inch roll, which is very conducive to our needs, right? We have a 6-inch wall. The 6-inch or the 18-inch piece gives us our 6-inch wall, gives us a 6-inch flange on the inside and a 6-inch flange on the outside. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to bring that Zip R9 up to the outside and then fold this over and tape it. So now I have that connection between my primary air barrier and the Sega MyVest. Now, the Sega MyVest also has that flange coming in on the inside here that after the roof trusses are done, we'll put the Sega MyRex, which is a different membrane. It's a smart vapor retarder, and we'll put that across the ceiling plane underneath the roof trusses and attach to it, and then simply tape it to this 6-inch flange of MyVest. And so basically it's that whole adage, remember the knee bone's connected to the ankle bone, blah, 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 right? Our primary air barrier is connected to the MyVest is connected to the MyRex is connected to the MyVest is connected to the Zip R9 on the other side. And we basically have continuity across the top of our building. So that's our sixth side of the box. Why am I talking about that now? Well, I'm talking about it now because as part of the sequencing in framing, when we're done with the wall, but before we set the roof truss, this membrane obviously has to get put in before the roof trusses get set. So as we look down the wall, you can see they're working on setting the trusses, but they're setting the trusses on that Sega MyVest. And that maintains that continuity of our red line up the wall, under the truss, across and down. So let's go check in and watch some trusses get set. So now that we have our air barrier detail intact. All right, so one of the important aspects of setting the truss is once the truss is in place, one of the things that we have to worry about is called uplift, right? When the wind blows against the wall here and that force goes up the wall, it's going to catch the soffit of the roof and it's going to want to give an upward lift to the truss. So we have to do some type of resistance to that, basically hold down the truss. And I can't be here for the life of the building and hold down the truss, so we have to do it with a mechanical fastener. So we have these 6-inch truss screws. And basically what this does is it gets screwed up through the plate into the bottom chord and basically holds down each of the trusses individually. So he has a little template guide there to get it started. And then he'll pull that off and then basically bury that into plate. And now you have these screws in there that basically go up into that bottom chord, and they're providing that resistance to the uplift of the truss. Yeah, baby. Nothing like seeing trusses fly in, is there? So, you can see we've been flying in our trusses. We talked a lot about getting our air barrier in place, how we put screws in for that uplift. You can see these guys setting the trusses. It's basically a 3-man team. There's not a lot of magic to it, just a little bit of coordination. You have a guy on the right heel, we have a gentleman on the left heel, and then we have a gentleman on the truss. The guy on the truss is there, you can see, he's basically setting up some metal braces. So these braces here, they're by Fasten Master. Now, the cool thing about these is you don't have to do any measuring, right? It springs open. Notice that it already has a bent edge. So let's just assume this was the bottom chord. It's just a brace, but it's the same 2x4 dimension. Look at this. It just pops down on. This one here also has that rabbited edge. It goes in. We have a couple nail holes here, and then this one basically grabs the previous truss that was in here. And then we have our perfect 24-inch on center, and the truss is braced, and it has that triangular brace in there so that basically those trusses get held together as a complete system until we can get that roof sheathing on there. So anyways, if you're working in trusses, Fasten Master has the solution for bracing. So there you have it. All right, so we're caught up with Brent. What's up, buddy? And Brent is, as you remember, owner and general contractor here, Green Logic Builders. So we're down in the basement. Now, typically in a basement, we just come down here and we start framing up partitions. But in this case here, we're gonna do something a little differently on the floor that said, let's just take the walls out of sequence for a minute. And now typically I would just come in here, I would put down a type 9 insulation, which is a EPS foam, 2 inches or 1.5 inches. And then we do 2 layers of Advantech on top, and we would cross laminate that and build a raft. But we're gonna do something a little different here, which I have done this detail before, but why don't you tell us exactly what we're doing here?
All right, so first of all, under our slab, we have continuous insulation that will run up the walls and tie it in. So we're not actually worried about the insulation on top of the slab. Down here in the basement, which is gonna be where my parents live, they wanted to have a site finished, nailed down hardwood floor.
A real hardwood floor.
A real hardwood floor.
Not engineered lumber, none of that, just an all natural, real, shot down hardwood
Exactly,
floor.
exactly. So being where we're at, what makes the most sense to me and what my framer likes to do is we're going to install a sleeper system. Actually, we're going to put down a vapor barrier first, the Vacal PU280.
Okay.
And then a pressure
And that's just to
treated.
keep the moisture from migrating up. I mean, so you guys understand there's that we're not trying to stop ground moisture because the closed cell foam under the slab is doing that.
Correct.
We're more concerned about the moisture from construction of the concrete.
Right, and we're going to be just shy of 4 months. I know the rule of thumb is a month per inch.
A month
of
per
slab.
inch is what I've been told by concrete people who know things as far as drying goes. But so you're taking added protection.
Exactly. Yeah, better safe than sorry.
Gotcha.
With this sleeper system, what I like is no concrete slab is perfect.
Right.
So this gives me the ability to set up a laser, shim my sleepers, and have a dead flat floor to build upon, basically.
Yeah, and if you know, when you look at the floor plan, pretty much except for the stairs and maybe a small pantry, this is one big wide open space.
Yep.
So if there is a little whoop-de-doo somewhere in the slab here, there's a chance it might get noticed.
Right.
Right, so this gives you that opportunity to shim these individually if they needed to get shimmed and get a nice level furring system. And then in between, we're gonna do
EPS.
EPS. We haven't gotten it yet. We're waiting on our delivery. So we just took a piece of polyiso, cut it, but you guys get the idea. In between, we'll have 1.5 inches of rigid insulation. And then of course, our Zip X Factor will fully sheathe the floor. And by not having any of the partitions in, obviously we're not dodging any bottom plate.
Right.
We can do the whole floor in its entirety, and then we'll come back, frame the partitions, and we'll be good to go.
Exactly. I mean, in the end, it's going to be a much better floor for my parents. You know, putting engineered flooring over a slab, you know, glue down, especially when you have imperfections, like you notice it. You walk on it, you can see it, you can feel it. This is going to feel like the floor is no different from what we have one story at.
And I know, you know, to close this out, I've done a lot of houses for older retirement people, slab on grades down in the Southwest, Texas, et cetera. And, you know, you don't realize it, but walking around on a slab all day, it's hard on your knees, your lower back.
Yep.
Like it adds certainly some stress to the body. And while this isn't much, there is a little give there that you might not recognize walking across it, but your body at the end of the day will certainly recognize that. So anyways, thanks for joining me, Brett. That is our basement floor assembly. All right, so we're up here and we're about to set the Gable End Truss. Now this is a little different than all of the other trusses that we've set. Notice that the framer took the opportunity to sheathe the Gable End Truss down on the ground and also barge out the rakes. The rake is basically the overhang at the end of the building. So rather than just put the truss up and then haul all that material up here and do all of that work high up here in the air, they elected to do all of that work down below on the ground and then let the crane do the heavy lifting and lift all of those components up as a sheathed Gable End Truss. So the guys on the heels, they're just making their final measurements and then we're gonna drop that in. But the thing to call your attention to is notice on that truss, we have that Zip R9. It's already attached to the truss. And then notice there's a 2x6 nailed to the inside of that. That 2x6 is basically the drywall catch to the inside of the ceiling, right? So again, they're just making some final measurements, checking off a few things here, and we're gonna set it into place. So it's much easier when you have the crane doing all the heavy lifting, right? That's the whole reason we have a crane here, is so that we don't have to do that. So, you know, the trick to it is, you know, you have this sheath truss system that's a few hundred pounds, and you can't just kind of kick it over 1/4 of an inch. You have to use the crane to get that kicking over done. So we got our Gable End Truss on. We got a small section of roof here. We'll let these guys finish out, but we'll come back. Stay tuned. We got a lot ahead of us, but as you can see, we put a lot behind us. All right, so we've returned. We're on the second floor. You can see all of our roof trusses are in. Not only are the roof trusses in, but the 5/8 inch zip sheathing is up there. It is fully taped, so we're weatherproofed on this floor as far as the ceiling is concerned. But notice that there's no interior partitions here yet, right? Typically you'd see the interior partitions going up. We'd see some strapping going up in here. But remember, when we were setting those trusses, we had that 18-inch piece of Siga MyVest getting draped over the top plate, where we talked about we'll come back later and we'll install our 6th side of the box, which in this case is our Siga MyRex, as opposed to the MyVest. So the Siga MyRex, smart vapor retarder, obviously manufactured by Siga. It is a smart vapor membrane that basically just gets taped, stapled up to the bottom of the trusses. And the reason we didn't do the interior partitions was that we can get a nice level of continuity. This comes in a 59-inch roll. It gets lapped about 4 or 5 inches. So it's pretty easy to manage. Certainly not that heavy, but by not doing those interior partitions, we get a very high level of continuity, and it's easier for the framers to come in and get that installed and then basically just set the wall plate or wall frame after that. And climb up the ladder here and we'll talk about exactly what we're doing here. So you can see this is that Siga MyVest that we installed prior to putting the trusses on. Now we're down at the end of the house here. And then the MyRex, it comes all the way down and it gets stapled off, basically a drywall catch. You can see how that just provides a little lip. They stapled that off, and then the MyVest basically just goes up. And then we have our Reson tape, which is also a Siga product, and that just tapes that off. The Siga membrane runs across the whole ceiling. All of the joints get taped. You can see we have a nice long joint down the middle there. All that Reson tape gets taped off. But also notice they make a double-sided tape here. So the guys were putting that on so that when you come up and you put up the MyVest, we don't have to staple it and put 1,000 holes in it. Now, I've had questions before, people asking, well, don't all those holes contribute to air leakage? No, we've done passive level houses, even stapling these off. But Siga, in their finest wisdom, they give us a double-sided tape, and you can see the tape running down through here. It's that dark streak where we get a good level of adhesion. And remember, this isn't up here to carry 1,000 pounds for the next 100 years. This is up here until we can get our interior partitions and all of that stuff in place. So there it is. That is the completion of our 6th side of the box. That goes out, and it's a direct connection with that outside flap being folded down to our zip R9 sheathing there. So we get nice closure around the whole top of that box. So anyways, that's our ceiling air barrier. All right, well, there you have it. Thanks for watching. That concludes pretty much our framing. We have, a few little tidbits that we need to tie up, some of the exterior sheathing that they're wrapping up, a little porch roof there, but as far as the framing goes, that's it. We discussed the wall framing, we discussed the floor framing, those open web floor trusses, we discussed our roof truss framing with the air barrier up there, our zip R9 sheathing, our sunken shower truss there where we have our zero clearance entryway. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed that, but have no fear. The next videos coming up, man, they are exciting. As much as I love framing, we're going to be out here with the HVAC guy, the plumber, the electrician, and we are going to be filling up the house with a lot of stuff. So stay tuned. That's it for framing, but we're coming back at you. Ductwork, wiring, and plumbing. I'll see you real soon. All right, so let's talk building elevations. You know, aside from floor plans, framing plans, and details, elevations are my favorite. So here, notice, remember, long, thin house. So the profile on the front of the house here, it's pretty narrow, right? Again, this is only 22 feet wide at its widest, and it's 58 feet long. So we get that short, narrow profile. A couple things to point out here. You know, we have our entry roof there, we have our deck here, but one of the things that you see up here is we have our attic hatch. Now, in the floor plan, we didn't talk about having an access hatch to the attic space. We actually went and talked to the fire department, the general contractor did, and just made sure that we can put our attic access on the outside of the building, which they were okay with. We're going to put 22 plus inches of insulation in that attic. The last thing we want to do is try and put some kind of scuttle through that 22 inches. It's much easier to go in and look at it from the top. So you see that there. This is that nice transom that's going to sit over the bed on that second floor, and then of course the door and window to the dining room. On the far side here, we have some really nice large windows here that feed the stairway, a couple for the bedroom and a nice corner one there just to get a cross breeze in that family room. And then of course we have our attached shed. So let's talk about the right side elevation. So on the right side elevation, we did a couple things here where you can see we have a slight cantilever. It's only about a foot there, but that allows us to change the orientation of our siding and give this kind of box inside of a box look. And you can see these three high windows there, they're kind of setting up a rhythm because that's where I'm walking in and going into the mudroom there. So as I'm walking through the mudroom, I'm kind of hitting these windows. I feel that rhythm, kind of part of my pace as I enter the house. Powder room window, and then this is a pantry window, one at the head of the stairs, and then of course these two here are just filling that stairway. They have their counterparts around the corner there that fill that whole corner of the stairway. And then these just get mirrored upstairs where we have the bathroom and the hallway up there. This is that bathtub window, and then of course this one up here services that little nook where we have that toilet there. But again, 58 feet here, and then of course the storage shed. But the thing that I wanted to point out here, notice that the windows, and you'll see the comparison when I bring up the south elevation on the other side, notice all of these windows are somewhat compact, smaller, right? So they're really tuned to climate zone 5 here. So, you know, that's the north side elevation. Hey, Steve Baczek, architect for the Build Show. We're out at our multi-gen project. Just want to take a second to thank one of our sponsors for being part of the project. Now, their sponsorship allows us to bring you all of this information. So credit to them for being on that educational train and allowing us to share some very valuable information with you. So Zip R Sheathing, it's by Huber Engineered Woods. Huber Engineered Woods creates systems for our exterior sheathing systems, our floor sheathing systems, and the Exacore product for acoustical and multifamily projects. Now, on this one here, we're using a Zip insulation product. It's their Zip R9. What that means is it has a resistance value of 9 built into the panel. I have a piece of it here, It is the standard 7/16 inch OSB panel, and then laminated to that is 1.5 inches of polyisocyanurate, so that we call that an R panel, basically outsolation. Now this provides continuous insulation on the outside of the house here, basically putting a sweater on the house and wrapping the whole house, very much like the jacket is doing for me in the colder weather. Now, it doesn't stop there. The beauty of Zip R sheathing, in fact, is it is an exterior sheathing, closes off my building. It is an insulating sheathing, provides a thermal benefit and becomes part of my thermal barrier system control layer in the house. It is a weather resistive barrier. It has an integral WRB on the face of the sheathing. WRB, weather resistive barrier. It's dealing with rain. It also, even though it has insulating sheathing, it has shear numbers to it. So it can become part of the shear system for the overall house. There are numbers, our structural engineer uses them to calculate the shear. Lastly, it is our primary air barrier on our wall system. I said it's a system, it says system right on their board. And what that means is they don't just make the board, they make the tape to seal one board to the next board. And you can see that here, it's rolled, we have the flashing tape. In our window installation videos, you see we have stretch tape, we can make our pan flashings. They've totally developed the system where we can close in our buildings with that one system using one manufacturer's kit of parts to close it up. Thanks to Huber for joining in. Thanks to Huber for developing such a great system that makes our life real easy out here on the job site.